The San Antonio Mennonite Church is Anabaptist, which is a reference to a theological protest about 500 years ago, essentially rooted in the understanding that all of our theology must be lived theology. Everything we understand about God and Jesus must be reflected in the way we live and journey. All of our prayer must be balanced with actions, and all of our actions must be steeped in prayer. Our community is centered in hospitality and healing, pilgriming and peacemaking. It's a long journey home, but we're all walking home together in the peace of Christ.
Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble in heart. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. You will find rest for your soul. You will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest.
Welcome to the San Antonio Mennonite Church. I'm Diane Garcia, the pastor family. We had a rainy, cooler week this week, but it looks like it's going to get sunny again soon. And you know, when we show up at this moment, ready for worship each week, we all come here having experienced some measure of gift and some measure of hurt. Maybe a lot of one and not the other, or maybe both equally. And we come here and we can give praise for those gifts and ask for help with those hurts and know that God is here with us, hearing us, listening to us. We can be refreshed and renewed by the power of being fully present in God's presence. And so we're here today together, and we're glad you're here with us. And as we go through the service, feel free to enter in greetings to one another in the chat and enter in any prayer requests, and we'll have a time to share those towards the end of the worship. But right now, let's start with a song.
How do musicians laugh? Yama ha 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 ha. Sorry. I'm sorry. My coworker says that.
Put that in the
We're gonna
service.
put, yeah, it's gonna hit it.
Lord of all, to thee we raise this our hymn of grateful praise. For the beauty of the earth, for the glory of the sky, for the love which from
Matthew 13:31-33. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened.
Well, this week, 3 of the families staying at La Casa de Maria y Marta, our church's hospitality house, had to go to the immigration office here in the city. And the office is in a big building in the middle of an industrial park. And each morning, the parking lot fills with people because when asylum seekers are released, they're given a check-in date at the ICE office pretty soon after they arrive. So whoever has a check-in scheduled on that particular day, they all show up there in the morning. And with the influx of people, there's been a lot of people. And the families are usually really nervous, and the setup isn't really calming. Everyone has to wait outside, and there's officers with weapons and other people who are coming out and shouting out names. But on Tuesday of this week when we went, it was raining, and so everyone who was there, maybe 100 people, they were all huddled together under this broad awning, and people were kind of chatting and striking up conversations in the way that you do when, you know, you're a little bit nervous and you're thrown together with people you don't know, where you can't sort of keep your normal distance. People who were from the same home country were introducing themselves and chatting and sharing stories, and one woman recognized someone she had crossed the border with, and they greeted each other like old friends. Even one of the ICE officers took extra time to explain to this woman who didn't understand what she needed to do next. We were supposed to be nervous in that powerless place, but instead it was actually rather nice. I could see and feel the good in everyone there. I felt like God's love was tangibly present, creating relationships and community. It felt like this unseen, unstoppable force that was growing and creating even in that barren place. You know those times where you're expecting something awful, but instead you get something surprisingly beautiful? It's so uplifting. And so then we came home, and when I got home, I sat down next to a woman who hadn't gone on this trip with us, and she'd been sitting there by herself. And she's just suddenly broke down in tears about how stuck she feels in this awful machine that asylum seekers have to go through. She has lost her young child in the system. She can't work and won't get a permit for months. She's been severely traumatized. Her family members who are still at home are struggling, and she can't help them. All she has to hold on to is this thin hope that maybe one day she'll win her asylum case and be allowed to stay. And then the reality of all this injustice just came flooding back into the room. It's like, you know, that feeling of waking up in the morning and you suddenly remember something bad that happened the day before. And, you know, it's that experience when our sense of peace is interrupted by a rushing wave of reality. This week, I've been thinking about all the things that make me feel the pain of injustice and just noticing them. Outside of this unexpectedly lovely morning at the ICE office, the discomfort of all of the injustice felt overwhelming. There's the injustice of our immigration system that feels so huge and intractable. And then that's just one thing. It's such a big world, and there's terrible things happening far away, and there's terrible things happening close to home. There's so much we're already carrying in our own hearts as well. How are we supposed to respond to so much hurt and need in the world? How are we supposed to keep our meager hope from being overwhelmed? We've been talking about how our actions have to flow from a place of being centered in God. And Jesus taught that our doing has to be rooted in being, that we have to focus first on being. We need to do perfectly, but not by focusing on doing, but instead because that is how redeemed people act when our actions are an outpouring of who we are. We do God's will because we're so firmly planted in the soil of being that God flows through us like nutrients rising up through our roots. We see a description of this way of being in the Beatitudes, and these are the verses at the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus defines blessing, all the ways that being bring us into communion with God. Jesus calls on us to be perfect, which feels like an unachievable goal. But at least when we intend towards these ways of being, then that pulls us all towards the kingdom of heaven. Last week we talked about hungering for righteousness, and we talked about how when we act from a place of just trying to take away the discomfort, the uncomfortable feeling of hunger, then our actions tend to be reactive or empty or transient. But also, when our actions come from the place of being overwhelmed, then we tend to give up. We feel like we have to fix everything, but we can't possibly do that, and that makes us get frustrated or we shut down. We find ourselves thinking, nothing I can do will be enough. And I think this is why Jesus gives us more than just one way to be. There are all of these facets of being that will collectively lead to doing in the way that we are meant to. We can't just take in all of the injustice in the world and sit with it all. It's true that we have to not look away, but we also have to know that we are not the fixers of all of these problems, and we can't solve them all. Jesus also says we have to be meek. Being hungry but being meek feel like they're in opposition to one another. We need to build up all this passion for righteousness, but then also we need to be quiet, gentle, submissive. That's because for us to act in this world from a place of rootedness in God, it needs to flow from all of these ways of being, from a place of balance and center. We need to be clear-eyed and see well what's going on in the world, but we also need to be accepting of our place and what we're being called to do. Being meek reminds us that when we want to make things happen, actually God is the one who's in charge, and our job is to listen and follow. We can't do it all. We need to watch for what God is telling us, what God is putting in front of us, where God is connecting the dots around us and within us, and we need to trust that. Another way to think about meekness is that it means fearing God, and I've always found that to be a really funny phrase because we normally talk about God as a loving parent who's holding you. You know, how can God also be terrifying? Why would I fear a presence of steadfast love? Or why would I fear a comforting friend? But we can also recognize that God is immense and powerful and mysterious. Annie Dillard says we should all be wearing crash helmets to church. And she writes, ushers should issue life preservers and signal flares, and they should lash us to our pews. I was thinking about this when I was on vacation because I was reminded there of feeling small and a little bit terrified. The lake where we were is special for a couple of reasons. First, the water is so clear you can see right down to the lake bed, at least where it's shallow. And it has a large area all around the shoreline of shallow water. So in most places you can walk in and go out 300, 400 yards and still be able to stand. But then if you keep going, there's a point where the shallow water ends and the lake bed dives down. It's like a cliff, but underwater. Because of the clearness of the water on a sunny day, this depth change is visible if you're standing on the edge of the lake. If you look out across the water, it looks like a crisp line where the watercolor changes from light blue to deep blue. And we call it the blue line. And I always wanted to swim out to the blue line, but I was never really brave enough until this last time that we went. You know, when you swim out in a big lake, you immediately recognize you're in a lake and not a pool. There's the temperature, but also the movement of the water. The water feels alive. It's a force. It has moods that change with the shifting winds and weather. But in this lake, all the time you're swimming, at least in the shallow part, it's just a few feet deep, so it feels pretty safe. But then you get to the blue line and it's like crossing over into the abyss. And I would swim looking down, watching as the shallow sand suddenly dropped off into nothingness. And every time I crossed that line in the water, my stomach came up into my throat and suddenly I felt so small. Across the blue line, I could look down and see nothing but deep blue all around me. I could feel the vastness of the world and how tiny I am in it. And I could feel the power of the water pulling and pushing. And in a way, the depths that I could sense there felt like actually they're really always beneath me. And the shallowness is just an illusion. And that feeling of smallness and the power of the water and the depth of the lake is terrifying. It's terrifying to realize how small we actually are and how incomprehensible and vast the world is. And I swam out to the blue water again and again when we were there. I wanted to hold on to that feeling of awe, that feeling of respect for this powerful, huge force. I wanted, when I crossed back into the shallow water where the world felt firm and knowable, I wanted to bring that sense of meekness back with me. When I was on the shore and felt so big and in control of everything, I wanted to remember that the vastness and the power and the mystery is always there. And, you know, we're back home now, and I was trying to think of a Texas analogy for this feeling. And I remembered sometimes being in a place where the night sky was dark. In Texas, of course, here we have some of the best night skies in the country if you go out of the cities and to the west. And when you look up at the night sky in a dark place, you can see a sky full of stars, which is amazing. And I always think also that it's amazing that for most of human history, that's what people saw every time they stepped outside. But, you know, now we mostly don't think about it because we live in places with so much light pollution. But if you've ever gone to a place where you can see all the stars in the Milky Way, have you ever laid down on a picnic table or somewhere where you can't see the horizon out of your peripheral vision so that all you can see are stars? And you suddenly feel like it's just you and the universe sailing through the sky, and that the universe is huge and we're so tiny, and it's actually pretty scary. That's the feeling of meekness and fearing God. That's recognizing our smallness. That's recognizing that all of our strength comes from God, who is immensely powerful. You know, several times in Matthew's gospel, Jesus compares us to tiny things: children, salt, yeast, a mustard seed. In these examples, we see this description of meekness. First, that we're tiny, but we aren't insignificant. A few grains of salt change the flavor of a dish. A loaf of bread with even a little yeast and some thyme will rise so much it pops the lid off of its container. And in the verse, a mustard seed sprouts and grows into the greatest of trees that becomes a home for the birds. Think about the seed in comparison to all of the soil on the surface of the earth. The seed is tiny, but when it's planted in soil, it becomes strong because it draws on the nutrients in the soil. It's tiny, but in the soil, it's supported and held and able to sprout. Or think about a single yeast cell in all of that mountain of flour. It's miniature in comparison, but it isn't lost. It finds food and it breathes and the bread rises. We're tiny, but we're strong when we draw on God's strength. And then also we see in these examples that we have a specific role to play in this world, even though we can't really comprehend it or always know how things are going to turn out. The mustard seed doesn't grow into many trees, just one tree that is formed and shaped by its environment. The yeast cell acts based on the temperature and the time and serves to make just that one loaf of bread. And the seed doesn't get to see the tree. The yeast can't conceive of the whole loaf of bread. Our understanding and our vision is limited. Being meek means all of these things. It means acknowledging that God has a plan for us, that we're being called to participate in God's creation, in bringing justice, but in the specific way that we were formed to be. And that we're small, we can't do everything, we can't fix everything, but we aren't insignificant. We are strong through God's strength flowing through us. We are one tiny part of working towards God's kingdom, even though we can't really understand how. Here's one more way I was thinking about meekness. In the middle of our long car ride about a week ago, Javi asked, Mom, who would win, the city or the forest? And I have no idea where he got that question from, but I thought about it, and in my mind, I saw an image of big bulldozers plowing over all the trees. City, I said. City wins. And he said, no, forest wins. The weeds will grow in the sidewalks. The trees will topple the buildings. Hungering is seeing the bulldozers and not looking away. Being meek is accepting the unstoppable, enormous power of God's creation. All the bulldozers in our lives feel so overwhelming. I see the abyss in the lake, but what I need to remember is that God is deeper and more powerful than that. God is the water filling all of that space, surrounding us and holding us up. I see the enormous void of the sky. But what I need to remember is that God is brighter than that darkness. God is the pinpoints of light spread across the universe. I see the meanness of the injustice of our immigration system. But what I need to remember is that God is stronger than that. God is the healing relationships that form all throughout it and in the midst of it. I see the machines tearing things down, but what I need to remember is that God has a plan that I, even in my smallness, am a part of, but that I can't fully understand. God is the vines that over time will grow from seemingly nothing and twine through the cracks and the sinews of the machines and turn them into gardens. That is God's power, filling these vast expanses and depths with love. And when we focus on being meek, then we can look for that power and recognize how incredible and how terrifying it is, and connect to it and draw on it to be who we are meant to be. And then we can act from that place, from a place of trusting and following God.
Morning has broken.
Welcome again to everyone who's here with us and watching this later. Peace of Christ to you all. Peace of Christ to Karen and Larry and Teddy and Dan and Mariposa and everybody else who's here with us. Just a few quick announcements. So first of all, there's been some really exciting things happening at La Casa. We've had a few families that have been stuck here for a long time, and one of them is going to be leaving today. So we feel really blessed that his wife and child got home from the hospital. They've been reunited and that they're going to be traveling. And we also had a new family join us this week with some serious health issues as well, but we're really grateful to have them joining our community. And last night we had an emergency, and I just wanted to shout out Danae and Jean, who did a ton of work yesterday, just spent a lot of time and energy helping out and just making things much easier. Also at noon today in the plaza, we're going to have a July birthday celebration. So if you happen to be watching this and are here in the city, you should come by for that. We need summer clothes and toy donations. Teddy's making an incredible area of our sanctuary at the back for kids. And so if you have any toys that you can donate for that, that would be great. And we have morning prayer every morning. We have Thursday nights dinner and music. And we also this Saturday are going to have a community night here at the plaza. That's going to be at 5:30. Matt and Sarah are going to be barbecuing up a whole bunch of things. And I think Nina and Ramona are bringing a lot of pies. So it'll be a really nice time. So hopefully you all can come out for that if you're here in the area. If you missed any of that or want more information, you can always go to our website and sign up there for our email. It's right on there. And peace of Christ also to Lisa and to Harry and Celeste. Glad you're back in town, or hopefully you are back in town, or if not, we're glad you're here joining us from wherever you are. And I wanted to share our prayers, some gratitude for this community and you all being here, and the ability for us to be together still on Zoom. And also I wanted to share this prayer from Karen, asking for peace for everyone caught in a net of injustice. Thank you for that, Karen. So let's close with a prayer, and then we'll have a song and a closing. God, thank you so much for this church and all the ways that you're working through us as a community and working through us individually, everything that you're doing in our lives, that we get to participate in that. And God, we're so grateful for the love that you share in us and through us. And God, we ask especially today for peace for everyone who's stuck in detention, for everyone who's separated from family, for everyone who is unable to live full lives and lives of safety. And we ask that you work through us and work through our systems to bring that justice. And God, I also ask for this family that's traveling, that you bless them as they go forward, and God, that you just be with them in this travel and everything that they're going to do next, that they can feel your presence with them. God, thank you for all that you do, and give us love and faith, God, as we go forward this week. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, I'm going to go get ready for our in-person service that's going to start in just a little bit. We're going to go out to the plaza. And afterward today, we're going to celebrate all of our July birthdays. So if you have one of those, we'll celebrate you in spirit. And if you are away from our church this week, or you've never been to our church, or you've never heard about us before, I'm glad you could join us today. And I hope that you might be able to join us here in person sometime soon. And until then, I pray for you to find your being fully in God's depth and power and love. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you, and may God give you peace. We live in a dangerous and scary place, but a place that's also filled with joy and beauty. God, by your light, let us see the miracle of your creation. By your voice, let us sing songs of praise. By your love, let us open our hearts to ourselves and one another. By your strength, let us be held and protected this week. And by your grace, let us be transformed. Let us be a part of making your kingdom here on earth. In the name of Christ, amen.